What's up, everybody? Thank you so much for listening. I wanted to put this in the top of the show. Make sure you subscribe on Patreon, patreon.com/Brennan Tassif. Check out the merch store at brennantcomedy.com to get your ex-drinking buddy merch. Subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. As always, we're coming to you live from Gotham Production Studios, and I hope you enjoy the episode.
Grab me a beer and grab me a coke. We about to sit for an hour, bullshit and tell jokes. And please don't mix it up, cause he done sobered up. Brennan T Comedy on your social media feeds. And Brennan Tassif is your ex-drinking buddy. Brennan Tassif is your ex-drinking buddy. Brennan Tassif is your ex-drinking buddy. Brennan Tassif is your ex-drinking buddy.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Brennan Tassif is your ex-drinking buddy. I'm your host, Brennan Tassif. If you're new to the program, quick rundown of the show. I used to be everyone's favorite drinking buddy. It was my favorite thing to do, hang out with friends, get drunk, do drugs, get in all sorts of trouble, and then reminisce about those crazy stories. I am sober now, but it is still one of my favorite things to do, hang out with somebody and reminisce about the crazy old days. Most weeks I'll be joined by a guest. This week is no exception. All the way from New York City, Mr. Teddy Fischer.
Hello, what's up?
What's up, dude?
Yeah, nothing much. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah.
We were kind of back and forth, but we got you here.
You got me.
Teddy was a little nervous about disclosing some certain stories on the podcast, but we're going to rip and roll now, baby.
I'm an animal, as you'll soon find out. Yeah.
Before we get too far into anything, plug everything up front. You do have your monthly show, your social media, plug everything.
Yeah. My I got an Instagram, Teddy Fischer _ haha. I occasionally post. I'm not very good at posting. Whenever I have a show, I usually post. Are
you more of a stories guy, or do you actually put like a post up there?
I guess I do stories. Like if I'm.
I was gonna say, because when I first started following you, you had like two posts.
Yeah, I have two. Yeah, I have three right now. Yeah, I'm great at self-promotion. But I'm doing at the Pit. I'm on an improv team that's gonna start performing. Every other Thursday starting October 5th.
Okay.
So you can see me do some improv there and stand up every once in a while.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Of course.
It's your first time on the show, so I want the listeners to kind of get to know Teddy Fischer.
First of many, of course.
Of course. We're going to have you back. I mean, all these crazy stories that you have sent me, we're going to have you on again. But let's talk about it. I'd like to figure out, because stand-up is niche, my listeners are sick of me hearing me talk about it. But how did you get into stand-up comedy as just the art form? Like, how did you even find it?
Yeah, I mean, I've been into stand-up for as long as I can remember, since I was a kid. Like my first memories are of like watching Seinfeld reruns with my dad. And so, yeah, since I was a kid, I've always had this dream of moving to New York. And,
so you,
and doing
okay,
stand-up.
so this is fascinating to me because I've talked about it a million times. Just a short recap. I started watching stand-up when I was 12, and I thought as an anxious, depressed kid, it was amazing that I could watch this and it would elicit a fun reaction. I would laugh because I didn't laugh very often. So I would feel good. And my cousin introduced me to it, and I was like, oh, this is crazy, but I could never do that. Huh. And then fast forward, I see Dane Cook, Comedy Central Presents, and I was like, oh, I want to do that. That looks like fun.
Right.
And then I started pursuing stand-up as a full-time thing. For you, watching Seinfeld as a kid, you just got it in your head at a young age, like, oh, I know what to do. I know I'm going to move to New York and pursue stand-up.
I mean, I guess so. I don't really remember since I was so young.
Yeah.
It's just like, I feel like just the idea of doing comedy has always been...
He's a comic in that show.
Yeah, he plays himself.
Yeah, so...
And like, I loved, the show itself, even more so. I mean, I love Seinfeld as a comedian, but Larry David's writing and those four actors together, I just loved so much and couldn't get enough of it. I have kind of like a religious type reverence for that show and how well made it is from like a comedy technical perspective. But yeah, I guess I just wanted to be Jerry Seinfeld. I just wanted to live in New York and do mics and have a bald friend and a crazy neighbor. So it never really, there was no like conscious decision of like, I'm going to move. I mean, I guess there was eventually.
Now that you live here?
Now that I lived here and moved here about a year ago, but it was just sort of always this like, yeah, I'm going to try to do
obviously,
stand-up comedy.
yeah. So where are you originally from?
I'm from Winnetka, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago.
Okay. And when did you do your first mic? Do you remember?
My first mic, well, I guess technically...
Or the first time you were on stage, I guess is a better way to put it.
First time doing stand-up was in college. There was we had a student stand-up group that would do a show every semester.
Where did you go to college?
I went to Kenyon College in Gambier, Ohio. Go Owls.
You're an owl too.
You're an owl?
Florida Atlantic University, burrowing owls.
Cool. Yeah, I'm sure our sports teams are just as impressive as yours. Yeah. But yeah, there was a student-run club that would do shows.
It's a small school, I assume?
Yeah, 1,200 students.
Holy
1,600
shit.
Students. Yeah. Tiny.
Yeah, my high school had 3,600.
My high school had 4,200.
Oh, wow.
So I went from a gigantic school to a tiny school.
What did you liberal arts, I'm assuming?
Liberal arts, and I studied English and theater.
Okay. Did you go there specifically for that, or was this a school you got accepted to and then decided you were going to do theater there?
I knew I wanted to study theater in college, and I wanted to, I thought about going to like a conservatory type, intensive, a BFA program, but I realized that I probably wanted to double major. I wanted to take classes outside of my major and get, I was into the idea of liberal arts, and Kenyon, that school sort of, in doing research, was a school that had a really strong theater department, but was still liberal arts. And I didn't want to be pigeonholed into you're going to be acting 24/7. Yeah. And then I did sketch and stand up there, but I started doing comedy for real last summer when you moved here. Yeah.
So when you were in college and you did the stand up for the first time, for that, because you said it was just a show every semester.
Yeah.
So you had never been on stage before. What was that process like?
Never done stand up before.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. So what was that process like getting ready to do stand up? Where you're just I'll just write some
yeah.
I love the listeners to hear this because it's always so different for everyone. I've had people on literally who go, well, the easiest barrier of entry into show business is comedy. That's why I did comedy. And I'm like, well,
interesting.
I fucking hate that I had you on the show. I've had other people.
They're a fake because they're a phony.
Well, yeah.
Who? I'm kind of. You can scroll through the.
Eric Walsh, use your AI program and go back through and scrub all the episodes. But I also have. People who come on and go, oh, I just was always the center of attention. That's why I got into comedy. Oh. And then obviously me, I'm a lot more pretentious about it, where I'm like, oh, it's about challenging the status quo. And Lenny Bruce is one of my heroes. And you have to go after the establishment.
All right, nerd.
But you come from a similar background.
Oh, yeah.
In the sense that watching Seinfeld, you're like, I want that life. I want to be able to do that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So when you get to college, what is the process like the first time you're going on stage? Because you don't know until you try, but you have so much history with Seinfeld and watching the show and wanting to do this for so long. Was it overwhelming or what was your process?
Yeah. I mean, I joined my sophomore year. I had already been I had already 2 journals worth.
That's what I figured.
Material. Yeah. I started writing comedy maybe late high school, early college. We just jot down bit ideas and I still carry my notebook with me that I've been carrying with me I think since my freshman year of college.
Oh, wow.
Where I jot down my little joke ideas.
Yeah, mine's in my backpack.
Yeah.
I've been doing it a lot, but I've got 10 or 12.
Yeah, this is my I think 5th or 6th.
Yeah.
But
somebody writes more than I do.
Yeah, man, and it shows. But
what are you going to tell us about your scar again, Brennan?
I actually haven't heard about your scar.
Oh, you
I've
haven't?
Noticed it.
Interesting.
And clocked it. But yeah, so for this student group, there was an audition where I think you had to do 2 or 3 minutes. So I just looked through my notebook and just chose the bit that I don't even remember I did this bit about voyeurism that jumped out to me. And so I just did that for the audition, and I remember doing it. It was 2 or 3 minutes.
Who were you auditioning for?
In front of the kids who were already in the group.
Okay. Because you know what I mean? It's who the fuck do you think you are telling me what's funny and what's not funny?
Yeah. And after, it was some English professor. But yeah, after that audition, it ended And I like remember like immediately after, and it was like, oh, this is what I'm doing. Like for sure. I'd already been doing like improv and sketch up until this point. It was like, oh.
But once you did it, you were like, oh no, it's comedy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I felt the same. I was hammered the first time I got on stage, 2009.
Sure.
And it was so bad. But I remember getting off stage going like, oh, I found it. People search their whole lives and never find it. And I was like, oh, I found it.
Yeah.
I found the thing.
Well, did you also have that feeling of like, fuck, like now I have to do this. now I have to commit so much time and energy to
honestly,
soul crushing.
At the time, I did not realize it was as bad as it was. Now it's funny. I actually get that more now being 35 and like going to mics with a bunch of like, you know, young 20 somethings and being like, I said it at a mic a few weeks ago and I said it as like a joke, but nobody laughed because it was so true and kind of like buried everything. Yeah. But I was up there and I was just like, oh my God, I'm 35. Some of you are only like 22. And I looked around the room and I just went, no help is coming. Like this is our lives. Yeah. And it just got silent. And I was like, oh, yeah. But I find it more now because, like you said, at the time, I mean, you obviously growing up with the internet and having podcasts and listening to comics talk about it,
right?
You knew much more than I did.
Yeah.
Because going into it, I was like, oh, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be like, you know, like my people I like, I'm going to be like Dane Cook. Like I was like, oh, this is it. Yeah. I'm doing it. And now.
Tough road to hoe.
It's a tough road, especially you mix.
We're still on it.
Yeah, you mix alcoholism and drug addiction with it. That was just like, and people tell me all the time. And do you get this too, where people will reach out and they'll say like, "Well, you don't have to keep doing. Like, you can do something else." And it's like, no, I can't though.
Yeah, not yet.
Okay,
that could.
Happen. Yeah, you're what? You're 22, right? 23. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm still.
I'm going to text you in 12 years and be like, "Hey, has anybody said it yet?"
Right. They come out like out of concern of like.
Yeah, so like being the age I am now, and I was at one point engaged to be married, and I was on this track where it's like, oh, you know, I went to rehab, I cleaned up my life. You're going to have this beautiful life, and I didn't go to law school at the time after college, but it's like, oh, I can still go back, and I was still in that window. And then I got back into doing comedy, and everyone was like, oh no, like we thought the comedy thing was like the drinking thing, like you were just doing them kind of hand in hand.
For a while we're the two inseparable.
Yeah. And so, but I was like, oh no, the drinking thing was debilitating, but comedy is who I am. And I've had plenty of people be like, well, why don't you just try to get a day? Or this is a big one. People will go, well, what's your plan B? And I go, well, I don't have a plan. If you have a plan B, you don't have a plan A. So I don't have a plan B. And they go, yeah, but you should have a plan B. And I'm like, no, absolutely not.
Yeah.
I spend $1,000 a month to do this podcast. Like, I'm not, there is no plan anything.
And that's awesome. But when you got sober, was it weird and crazy to do stand-up sober?
It was very difficult. You had to I had to relearn how to watch movies. I had to relearn how to watch TV. I had to relearn how to do stand-up. But last thing, and then we got to get back on you because so many of my listeners complain I talk too much. I was 3 months into getting sober this last time. So I almost died on my 30th birthday. I get sober. 3 months into it, I called my sponsor and I said, if it's just going to be working 2 jobs, going to the gym every day and meetings every day, you can have it back. I don't want it. Like I'm going to.
Sobriety?
I was like, I'm either going to go back out or I'm going to kill myself, which isn't an idle threat because that's something that's happened before where I've attempted that. And my sponsor says, you need to find something that you're passionate about. Well, he said 2 things. He said, first, you need to work with more alcoholics. It's about service. And 2, you need to find something you're passionate about. And it was him. He goes, what about comedy? You always loved comedy, but you haven't even mentioned it since you got sober. And I was like, well, I thought that was gone now because it was so hand in hand with my drinking.
Interesting.
And he goes, no. He's like, if that's what you're passionate about, that's what you love, and you're serious about your sobriety, as long as you maintain your spiritual wellness and your mental wellness, you can do whatever you want, booze or otherwise.
Wow.
Like being around booze and drinking. And I say all the time that saved my life. It's like comedy saved. Going back and doing stand-up gave me purpose again. Yeah. And now having all these stories about drinking and then being able to be on stage and be like, hey, have you guys ever faked paralyzed because your parents weren't giving your alcoholism enough attention? And nobody has. But then it's fun because it's like, no, nobody in this room. Yeah. And then you meet someone every once in a while, like Cody Lewis, friend of the show, who's like, dude, I faked paralyzed before. And it's like, yeah.
Only another comic.
Exactly. But so for me, it was a big thing. So for you, we're going to bring all this back. Right. Don't worry, baby birds. I'm going to feed you. For you.
That was creepy. You call your listeners baby birds?
No, it's.
You do now.
I do now. when you get off stage that first time, just from the audition, you were like, this is it.
Oh yeah. And my reaction was shit.
Like, yeah, because you knew.
Now I have to. Now, I was well versed enough to know, like, it is like, I feel like, you know, the people who have the itch to do stand up, like, it is an addiction. Kind of, there's sort of this compulsive need to perform.
Mm-hmm. I can't go more than 3 days.
Oh yeah,
yeah, and I work in a restaurant, so like I'm always on. Like I'll try bits out. If they're softer bits, I'll try them out on my tables.
Sure, yeah,
because I'm a storyteller, so it's easy.
Yeah.
You just mention something, they go, wait, what happened? You go, oh, funny you should ask.
Yeah. Have you ever faked being paralyzed?
So when did you decide, because you're obviously staying in school, you wanted to major in theater, that's why you went to college.
Yeah.
What in your head is the plan after you get off that stage? Even after that audition, in your head, are you automatically like, okay, so I'll finish my degree, then I'm going immediately to New York, or like, how are the pieces working?
I mean, it was still vague for a little bit. It was like, well, I love comedy. It's both stand-up and sketch and improv, and I love acting. And I was thinking for a while, it was sort of a vague, like, oh yeah, I could go to New York and do the stand-up theater thing. I could go to LA and maybe try the sort of film TV world, or maybe I thought about going to Chicago and sort of doing the improv stuff. But yeah, I sort of decided on New York.
I've never listened to someone break it down so succinctly, but that's exactly.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Because everyone always goes, oh, it's New York or LA, but you were like, oh no, I would go here for this, there for that, or there for that. That was very well.
But I felt like New York had a little bit of everything, you know, a little bit of all those things. And I felt like stand up was what I was most interested in. Most of my friends from college were also moving to New York, and I already knew people here, so it just kind of made sense. It was like, I think like pretty early on in my senior year, it was decided like, yeah, when this ends, I'm moving to New York.
Okay. Yeah. And then you continue just to write and then do that show. Did you try any other shows, or were you just doing the once?
No, I did a couple mics. My senior year, I was in. I visited some friends in LA over spring break and did a couple. That was like my first time doing mics.
Let's talk about that.
I did like 2 or 3.
How was that?
It was fine. The first one was great.
Was there anybody that you ran into who's like an established comic that you know now?
Not that I know of.
It'd be hilarious if you were just like, yeah, fucking.
Yeah.
We love comedy, and I could not reach
Jerry
for an LA comic because it's just like an LA comic. You're like, yeah, Jamar Neighbors came on the show. Or like,
no, they were in, like, one was at Flappers in Burbank, and then the other was at like a dive bar.
Okay.
And the dive bar one was awesome. It went so well. And that was the first one. And then the Flappers one I bombed.
Do you know, for the dive bar one, do you do any of those bits still? Do you have anything?
Do I? I don't.
Because I'm just trying to picture it in my head.
I might have done. Have you heard my bit about JFK?
Give the Oscars.
Give the Oscar. That one. No, that one's in the past year or so.
I love that bit.
But I think I have this joke about JFK, learning about JFK when I was a kid. I don't know if you've heard it.
No. Oh, no, I have.
Yeah, but that one was an early one that stuck around. Yeah.
So you're at this bar show and you're like...
It was a mic.
Yeah, but I'm sorry. There's a big distinction.
Please.
So you're at
I'm an open micer.
But you're at this mic and you're just like, bang, bang. And were you like, I'm going to do this?
Yeah. And also my first time doing an actual show in school in front of an audience, I went... I was like, maybe there were like 10 or 11 of us in the group, and I think I went second to last. And
5?
What? 5 minutes, yeah. And everyone... I don't mean to shit on all the people who are in this troupe, but no one did well. And then I got up and did really well.
You crushed.
And I was like, well, this is cocaine. Yeah. And it was another oh shit moment. Because it's like, I know that the next 1,000 sets are not going to be like that.
But it's
the high you keep chasing.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes it feels like, and I've heard other comics say this, there are times in my career where I'm like, oh, nothing is funny. Like if you're at a show and everyone's bombing and then you're thinking about your material in your head and you're like, none of this is going to work.
Right.
And it's like, nothing is funny. Like I don't know how to make anyone laugh.
Yeah.
And that happens and there are times where I've gone on shows and I'm like in the green room, like getting ready to go up and I'm like, I don't think any of this is going to work. This is going to be horrible. And then I get up and the first joke just hits and you're like, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we're cooking. And then you just bang, bang. And you're like, all right, here we go.
Yeah.
And then at the end of it, you're like, how the fuck did I do that?
Yeah, it's weird.
Because like you said, it's this astounding high. And you're like,
right.
I had everyone in this room. And it's
great once you get that first minute over and you've proven yourself and you know that the next 4 minutes are going to work.
Yeah.
It's the most fun you'll ever have. Yeah.
It's so funny you say that because obviously we go to a lot of the same mics and I have a show coming up and I was working the set out, but it's a set I feel like I already have down, but I wanted to try it like in a different order.
Right.
So I did it, but everyone at the mic has heard it a million times. Yep. So nobody laughed. And it's so funny you say that because after the first like 30 seconds and none of it hitting, in my head I was like, why are you doing like this is going to get worse. Like
if you keep doing the bit,
nothing's gonna turn around,
right? Because
everyone in this room has heard all of these jokes a million times.
Yeah,
and it was so like self-defeating. I was like, this is why I don't do this at mics,
right?
Because,
but then when you don't prepare and then you do a show, do you feel like and you
it's
dust off a bit?
Yeah, and then I skip a word or I miss a tag, and I'm like, fuck,
I should have practiced.
Yeah. So it's a whole, oh my God.
But then when you practice, you realize, is the bit even funny? Yeah. It's the most frustrating thing in the world. Yeah.
So when you moved to New York, did you hit the ground running? Were you like, all right, it's comedy, it's on?
Yeah. I moved here. I did like a week or two after graduating. I moved here and took like a 5-week acting class because I got like student housing through that.
Was that here?
Yeah. That was in Manhattan. And, I would do it was like a Shakespeare class. I would do my Shakespeare class from like 9 to 5 and then do like 2 or 3 mics.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah. So I was doing like the most pretentious thing possible and then the least pretentious thing possible. And it was a blast.
I wanted to because I know obviously stand-up, I think it's safe to say is your first passion. And then we're going to get into some of the stories, but this is something I've been wanting to have you on the show to talk to you about. Mm-hmm. You're a big movie guy. You love film. You love cinema.
Oh, yes.
You talk about, the reason I bring this up is because I've listened to one podcast for almost 15 years that's a movie podcast. Mm. And one of the guys on it is very much like, the films, it's cinema. And the other guy's like, Transformers, Fast and Furious. I love it.
That's fun.
So that's why it's a fun...
Yeah.
But when you had mentioned on stage that you like movies, you have the whole bit about the Oscars and The Shape of Water and all this kind of stuff. I was like, oh, this is sick. There's another person I can talk movies with. And I got so excited.
Right.
And then I went up to you and I was like, oh, yeah, I'm rewatching like all the Christopher Nolan Batmans. I was like, I really like The Dark Knight. I think The Dark Knight Rises is a little underrated. You know, it's gotten played out. And you just looked at me and went, yeah, pretty good. And I was so...
Because I didn't have much else to say. I haven't seen those movies.
You haven't?
No, I have. I haven't seen them since I was a child.
But
who those movies are for.
Yeah, when...
I'm joking. I'm joking.
But for you, because I want to know where your passion for movie... Because even if the bit is only half true, the bit you say, you obviously have...
The Shape of Water bit's 100% true.
It's 100% true.
No,
so you obviously have... a passion enough to where you in this class where you don't say anything, you blurt out like shut up, like you're an idiot.
Screamed at a girl.
Yeah. So where did that come from?
I mean I don't really know. I mean like sort of like, you know, film lovers and cinema lovers, they like or people who are really into film or who become filmmakers, I feel like they tend to have like that one movie that they watched as a kid.
What's yours?
That change the way they see movies. I mean, it's the most cliche answer in the book, but it's Pulp Fiction.
Okay.
Which again, like such a like eye roll, like film bro, like Pulp Fiction. But I watched that when I was 12 or 13. You know, as a 12 or 13 year old should be watching Pulp Fiction.
Did you know what
a gimp was? I learned quickly. Yeah. Guess what I went for Halloween as that year.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it you know, before then, like, movies were just sort of, you know, just kind of mindless entertainment. It was like, oh, you just watch a movie to kill 2 hours.
Yeah.
But then I watched that and was like, oh, a movie could be so much more than that. And then, then that was, so I was 12, 13. And then in high school, got pretty into movies, just sort of, you know, did sort of the typical, you know, like I'm really into David Fincher now, and then or Wes Anderson.
Kubrick is a little underrated, you know.
yeah.
It's very Kubrickian.
And then in COVID, during COVID, I got really into two things. One of them, yes, cocaine and sex. But I got really into like, there's this book in my house that I got for Christmas or something one year called 1001 Movies You Need to See Before You Die.
Okay.
And I started going through that. And so that's when I started getting into like the like really pretentious like foreign films and silent films and that kind of stuff. And then the other thing,
the right one in, that kind of stuff.
Sure. Yeah. And then the other thing I got really into was Survivor.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I've seen all 44 seasons of Survivor, some more than once.
No way.
Yeah. So again, in COVID, I was engaging in the most pretentious and least pretentious.
This is your thing.
Yeah, I only exist on the polls. That's, yeah. It's either filet mignon or Cheetos for me.
Yeah, right?
Nothing in between, yeah.
I wanted to ask you, so to get to some of the stories, when did you, because growing up, would you say you grew up like a sheltered, or was it kind of, were you out there partying, or like how was you come off as somewhat of a sheltered kind of a guy? In my opinion.
Sheltered. How do you mean sheltered?
Like not getting into any trouble, kind of walking the line, like not. I could be wrong.
Oh boy, are you? No, I guess If that's what you mean by sheltered, I didn't like. You mean like partying, drinking, that kind of stuff? I mean, I guess like. In high school, I would go to the occasional party.
So when was the first time like you drank? Were you in high school? The first time you ever drank like at a party?
Yeah, had like a little vodka at a high school party. I was like, I'm so drunk right now.
Did you? So that was the first time.
I guess, yeah, but it wasn't. It wasn't. It didn't really feel like that big of a deal to me because at my high school, at least. Felt like everyone
5,000 kids.
All 5,000 of them were
just drunk all the time.
But even like it was literally like it was my junior year and like once or twice a year.
This is why I find this interesting, is because of the different dynamics people have when it comes.
When did you start drinking?
I didn't start drinking till I was almost 18 years old.
Oh, really?
Everyone.
I was about the same age, probably.
But I was a senior. I'm like a summer baby, so I was like a year behind everyone else. But as far as like I was always a year younger in my class, but. The reason why this is interesting to me is because growing up, like my siblings, and I've talked about this before, would go to parties and drink. And then I had an ex-stepdad who was incredibly abusive and an alcoholic and physically and verbally abusive to me and my mom and stuff. And I used to always think like I would never drink. Drinking's poison because of what I saw. Mm-hmm. Or like, my sisters would get like go to a party and get drunk and then like, have so much fun with their friends, but then someone would get in trouble. And I'd be like, see what it does? See? So for me, drinking was a huge deal. And that's why I find it interesting for you to say, I drank, but it was just like, we were just doing it. It wasn't a big deal. Because in my head, I was so anti-drinking. And I talked about this with Joe List, but...
Name drop, all right.
But let me pick that up. The reason
was he one of the terrible guests?
No, not at all. He's like 10,000 views on YouTube.
That would make sense.
But he's very, very famous. But the reason I bring that up is because it was the clip, and it's something that means a lot to me because it was a very similar situation to where he said, then I started drinking and I was like, oh, like what have I been missing? Like this is awesome. And I bring all of that up to say you had such a different experience. It's the same thing. It's the same setup, high school, being around friends, trying to like do this fun thing everyone else is doing.
Sure.
And your experience was so drastically different from mine.
Yeah.
And that's why I love doing the show, is because you were just at a party and you're like, I'll try it. Nobody died. The building didn't explode. I don't think so. But you know what I mean? Yeah. So for you, after trying it the first time, was it just, did you have a good time? Were you like,
I thought it was gross. It tastes like rubbing alcohol.
Did you get fucked up, or were you kind of like, okay?
No, I
could just,
because I think I like being in control.
Yeah.
And it was sort of immediately apparent to me that like, getting drunk is the exact opposite of that. Yeah. So not for me.
So you just,
although I do drink, but
but you're just you're not one of those guys who's going to get
moderation. Yeah.
So when was
for now? We'll see how the rest of this interview goes.
I wanted to ask you about the champagne thing.
The champagne. Oh, on my list.
Yeah.
That is one of the two times I've been like capital D drunk in my life.
That's the name of the episode.
Yeah. Oh, cool. All right.
See how it happens?
Yeah. Wow.
I've never heard anyone say it like that.
Capital D drunk?
Yeah.
There you go.
I've heard like blotto, fucked up, wasted. Capital D drunk.
Capital D. Yeah.
You do have a very radio voice.
I do, yeah.
Capital D.
I've been told that. I've been told I have a face for radio as well.
Well, fuck those people. I think you have a face for the movies.
Oh, thank you, man. Thank
course.
you. A face for cinema. Yeah.
I knew you were going to say it. I almost said it. I almost changed it to cinema.
Yeah, for moving pictures.
For noir film.
Oh, yes, of course.
So,
the Champagne Story.
Champagne Story.
Yeah,
when was this?
This was my sophomore year of college.
So when you get to college, immediately are you like, because you never had a desire to like get fucking wasted. So when you get to college, well, you went to a small school too. Like, are people getting drunk around you all the time, or like, because it's still college?
Yeah, it is college, but it wasn't like people would party Friday and Saturday nights.
Okay,
that was. I think. Well, there were some people who would obviously do it more, but
I remember showing up on campus and my roommate was like ripping a gravity ball.
On your first day,
he moved in, his dad left, and he was like, "You want to hit this?" And I was like, "I don't really do weed," and he was like, "Let's go get some rum then." And I was like, "Fucking
yeah." And there were definitely some people like that at the school. But yeah, our school used to be ranked. Forbes did like a list of like the top 100 party schools in the country, and the legend, I've been told that our school used to be number 100.
Oh, really?
And it no longer is. Yeah.
I mean, that's still something. There's thousands of universities. So it'd be a 100 ranked.
But that ended, I think, maybe a few years before I went there.
So then you got there and you're like, where's the party?
right. Yeah. But no, I mean, that's like, sure, it's a small liberal arts school kind of with a fairly nerdy student population, but still definitely like
nerds can get after it.
There's drinking at every school.
As a nerd and a recovering alcoholic, I can say nerds can get after it.
Sure. Yeah.
So your sophomore year,
my sophomore year,
you were like, let's do it.
Yeah. Well, no. Well, kind of. Yeah. You ever heard of Roofalin? No. No.
You keep saying that word, roofie. I don't even know what that word.
Yeah. Whenever you say that word, I get weird. Yeah, but it was my sophomore year, and I had assistant stage managed a play. I basically worked on the stage crew for a play, and there's a tradition in our school's theater department, or at least I was told there's a tradition, where when the show ends at the cast party, the stage manager gives their assistant stage managers a bottle of champagne.
Okay.
And I was gifted one by my good friend Jane, who was the stage manager. And I was like, oh, well, I'll just drink the whole thing tonight.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So take us through the thought process with this, because you don't drink very often.
But no, I mean, it was college, so I was drinking like most weekends, just not.
You're just not getting
yeah, just a beer or two.
So that's why I'm asking. Right. When you decide, are you like, oh, well, I like in a devious way, like I guess I'm drinking this whole thing, or were you like, oh, it's champagne, I can drink this whole thing?
Kind of a devious way. Let's just have fun. Let's just see what happens.
Let it rip.
And so I downed it in like under an hour.
That's a lot. That's pretty quick.
Yeah, and was apparent. Well, I actually do. I've never been blackout drunk, so I do remember most of it, all of it. And I was very, very
good catch.
Talkative. I was very talkative, and I danced a lot. I danced. I tore up that floor.
Can you dance?
I could that night. Yeah, but what I did is once I finished the champagne, we were in an apartment. On the first floor of an apartment. Once I finished the bottle of champagne, I opened up the front door and smashed it on the sidewalk. And that's the most badass thing I've done in my life.
Was everyone like...
We're like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Teddy's going great.
Teddy's lost it.
Yeah, and then I threw up. Yeah, I threw up once or twice, and that was the next day was my only time being hungover. So
how was that the next day waking up hungover?
It felt like shit. I was, I threw up. I woke up and vomited, and
did you?
Felt like shit the whole day.
Since you had not been hungover, especially to that extent, were you like scared or nervous? Or
no, I was like, this is. I've seen enough movies to know like today's gonna suck.
Yeah,
and I had to, because in theater the day after a play ends, you do strike, where you like everyone goes and they take down the set and they clean out the dressing rooms and stuff. And so I had to get up at like 8, I had to be there at like 8 a.m.
So you were up at like 7 o'clock throwing up. Like here we go.
I was showering and I had to like get out of the shower and. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, and I was like, all right, well now I've had this experience. Now I know what it's like to be hungover.
And you don't want to do it.
Don't need to do it again.
Yeah, it's weird too as you get older. I mean, you're still very young, but do you hate it when people say that? Like, oh, you're so young. I realized that because I was always the youngest in a lot of stuff I did. I always hated when people were like, oh, you're so young. It's like, shut the fuck up.
I I don't really care. I mean, it's true.
Yeah. I mean, in comparison, it's all relative.
Right.
I'm literally 13 years older than you.
You're you're 35?
God, I wish there was a 2 in front of that. I wish I was still 29, baby. Hey, I got sober at 30, and it's so weird to think that now I'm 35. Because it's like
5 years.
But it's like I remember my last drunk very vividly, as one would. But you're like, there's no way that was 5 years ago. That feels like it was yesterday.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Time, man. Doesn't stop.
I have mad respect for that.
So I want to ask you about the Franzia thing.
Franzia's the other story. Yeah.
What?
Tour de Franzia.
Tour de Franzia, excuse me. When was this?
Yeah, this was another tradition, I was told.
Oh, I meant to ask you about the champagne story.
Yeah.
When you go to strike the next day, is everyone like, what the fuck, Teddy? Or like, Teddy's a wild man?
I don't remember.
Okay.
Well, because everyone had been at that party the night before.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So were they like, what?
Yeah, I don't really remember. I think I
Girls
assume...
come over and just put their arms around you like, oh my God, you're so awesome.
You tore up the dance floor last night. That was... I assume I kept it short and sweet. Back home.
Well, I'm sorry that I stopped the other story too.
Oh no, it's fine. We didn't even get started on Tour de Franzia.
Yeah, so this sounds like it's a tradition. This sounds very much like it's got a name.
Yes, it does. It's something we did at my school during, we had senior week, which was the week in between the end of finals and graduation, where it's just seniors on campus and you do whatever the hell you want. Yeah. And one of the things that people would do is this thing called Tour de Franzia, where you get into you and your friends get into a team, and it's a race. It's a race where you have to run around the whole campus, and you have to like take a selfie at like a bunch of different buildings to prove you did it. Mm-hmm. And by the time you reach the finish line, you have to have finished a box of Franzia.
Tell the listeners what Franzia is.
Franzia is very high end boxed wine. It's very expensive and
normally used in cooking.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah. It was not used on cooking on that day. Yeah. Yeah.
How do you even get roped into this?
Everyone did it.
Because it's a tradition.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we did it. And I carried the team, let's say.
Did you really?
Oh, yeah. I was like, we were about halfway through. I'm like, we're not even halfway through the bag. Like we really need to pick up the pace.
Because you're competitive.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And so I start doing
just chugging Franzia.
Yeah.
Just like the champagne all over.
But thank God. I mean, Franzia tastes so good, so it just went down. It was so tasty. It was like drinking fruit punch. Yeah. And the crazy thing is, because it lasted maybe about an hour, and you're sprinting the whole time, so you don't feel drunk at all. And the race,
your adrenaline's going.
The race ends. And it's like 0 to 100. It's like you get hit by a truck of like, there was no steady incline here. Like I went from dead sober to wasted in like that.
God.
And so, yeah. And then I danced a lot.
You danced again?
Probably. Yeah.
That would track.
Got very talkative, danced a lot, and vomited and went to bed. Yeah.
Did you wake up the next day? Were you hungover?
No. Okay. I felt fine.
Probably from the running.
Yeah, maybe.
Did you win?
No, we got, I think, we placed in maybe the top 10. I think we got first or second for the NARP league. Okay. Because the track and field team won. Yeah. And probably every athlete beat every non.
But how many, because there's only 1,200 or 1,600 kids at this school, so how many kids are in your graduating class?
You can do the math on that. I don't know. Well, but we had more kids because I went to school during COVID, so we had an excess because of kids who deferred or took semesters off. Okay. So we had more than usual.
Because it's just when you say like, oh, we finished in the top 10, it's like, well, there was only 10 teams.
I don't know. I think we did well. I wasn't.
I'm just shitting all over your Tour
when we
Franzia.
Finished the race, figuring out our placement was not my priority.
That's true. You were hammered.
Yeah.
So since moving to New York, because you had mentioned earlier, you're not, obviously, you don't drink that, not that you don't drink that often. Right. You don't get out of control. Yeah. Except for these two awesome stories that you had. Tour de Franzia, man. That's fantastic. Yeah.
So do it again in a heartbeat.
Since I can make that happen.
Just for the wine.
I know comics, one of which is a friend of the show, who sets up a biannual Molly night for comics. Do you want in on that?
No.
Okay. Thought I'd offer.
If there's running involved, sure.
So since moving to New York, have you been in situations where you're like hanging out with comics and everyone's getting hammered? Because you make that face, but I've been here a year longer than you, and yeah, I'm sober, but I've seen it before, but I don't see it that often where comics are just getting fucking wasted.
Right. Yeah, no, not really. Yeah, and even like I've obviously been in situations where there are drunk people everywhere. But no, I've sort of just always been like, yeah, I'll have a beer or two, get a little tipsy, and that's enough for me.
Have you ever had to deal with like a wasted heckler before yet?
Not yet, no. Oh, no, actually, I had a mic, actually.
Tell that story.
I hosted. I used to...
Oh, wait, wasn't I at the next mic?
Eastville? In Brooklyn?
No, so there was a guy who was wasted at a mic a couple weeks ago, and I had made no, it was somebody else, because I had made a joke like, oh, you should see that guy, and then the other comic was like, yeah, he was just at the last mic I was just at and heckled me. Oh. For a second I thought that, but it was someone else.
No.
So what happened with you?
Yeah, I used to host Laughing Buddha mics at Eastville, and there was one night I used to host the 9:30. It was on like 9:30 on Sundays.
Okay.
And yeah, there was one night where like a guy, I had already performed, but I was hosting, so I was going up in between each act. And these two guys came in, and one of them was just absolutely hammered and just screaming through people's set, like not even any like trying to tell jokes, but he was just
yelling.
Yeah, just yelling and being disruptive. And me and the other host, we had to like stop the mic and like turn the lights off and be like, all right, like the mic can't continue until you leave. Yeah, essentially. But I wasn't like
for you.
What was that like for me?
Yeah, just
scary.
Yeah, because I hate as big as I am. I don't like confrontation. So if it gets to the point where I have to be like, hey, you need to leave. Like I'm normally pretty elevated because the point it has to get to for me to say something, because I don't want to say anything. Yeah. I'm pretty heated. But I hate saying something.
Well, we got helped out by two comics who pretended to be security guards.
Okay.
Which was nice. We didn't even ask them to do that. But yeah, that was, I wasn't like trying to do material or anything, so I haven't dealt with that in that sense yet.
But were you, so you just asked the guys, you just got on stage and turned on the lights?
And luckily his friend seemed sober and sane. And so we were like, can you help us? Like you and your friend need to leave. And so he also.
Oh, wow. So you I always get worried that if I ask someone to leave, be at the restaurant or a show or something, they're going to be like, no. And
that was my fear too. Fuck. It's like, well, okay, like I'm not gonna. Like, I can't beat this guy in a fight. Like, what am I? Yeah, yeah.
It's weird when it happens during material.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Like when you're doing something and you have like
like a you suck. That kind of thing.
Like you have like an end goal, and sometimes you can. It's easy. Like sometimes you can quell it by being like, what? And then they'll be like, oh, blah blah blah, and then you just like hit them with something real quick and then go back to the bit. But then sometimes it's. I remember one time I was at a show and it was a bar show in Florida.
Sounds great.
It was ambush comedy.
Yeah. Nice.
Like they didn't know we were doing a show, and there was a bunch of these like older like Florida fans there, the University of Florida, which I played against in college. So I made a bit, I was doing a bit, and then one of them just kept talking, and I turned to him and I was like, and I just said something like off the cuff, like, hey man, I played against Florida in college. You guys are a bunch of pussies, because they were all wearing like University of Florida gear. I was like, so just shut up and listen or go to the other side of the room.
Yikes.
And I thought like, ha. That's not how he was. They like got visibly upset, the little group. And then instead of leaving.
Were they around your age?
Or no, they were like in their 50s, like 40s and 50s.
Yeah, that was bad.
And at the time I'm like 26, 27.
Yeah.
And I was thinking like, oh, we're just like how fans of teams will talk shit to fans of other teams. So I thought that's what we were doing, but they took it so personally because I was the guy on stage with the microphone that instead of starting a fight with me, they just talked much louder for the same conversation. So literally I was like, yo, shut up, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And then they just went back to, yeah, so what do you think we're going to, and I was like, oh, because it's just stepping on everything I'm saying.
Right.
And that was one of the only times where I was like, I don't know how to get out of this.
Yeah.
Like I went after them, they didn't listen, but then they didn't leave or do it. Because at least if they would have like came after me, like physically or verbally, like now we're doing something.
Right.
But they literally just went back to their conversation, like amplified volume. And I was like, oh, fuck.
That's why I'm like, because I'm not a crowd work guy at all.
Yeah, me neither.
But it's like, I clearly need to practice it for situations like that.
Yeah, it's important to have it in the back of your pocket.
Yeah.
But like Kinane has a great bit that he's doing now. He just put up online, but it's funny where he's like, everyone's doing crowd work, and then he looks at the guy in the audience and he goes, "What do you do?" And the guy says it, and he goes, "I don't really care. You paid money to see me. Like, I don't care what you do."
Well, yeah, that's the thing. I feel like all the posting on social media encourages it.
It's very much so.
Because every other video is...
I talk about this with comics all the time, whether they're older comics who are like super successful or like younger comics, because obviously it's the people that are younger than me that grew up on social media, so they understand the algorithm and stuff like that. You being the exception. But I find it fascinating because the thing that gets the most views, the most clicks is crowd interaction.
Yep.
And people are like, "Oh, if I would have had like a camera on the audience to get their reaction to my reaction, like that's a viral clip." And I'm like, well, that's dumb. To me, that's stupid.
Yeah.
But also it encourages audience members to feel like they are now a part of the show.
I know. Yeah.
And I talk about this with comics all the time. Like Matt Rife, who's doing his big tour and he's got all the success.
Mm-hmm.
But I saw a tweet that he posted where he was like, "You guys need to stop yelling out in my shows. You're ruining it for everyone else." And I
stopped posting on Instagram.
Well, I saw that tweet and I kind of was baffled because I was like, no, you started this.
Yeah.
You, not you, but him single-handedly on TikTok started this whole movement.
Yeah.
Because he's fantastic at crowd work.
Right.
And so he started doing that. And then everyone else started copying it because he got all these followers from it. And now you're going around being like, "Hey, stop yelling out." It's like, no, you did this. You did this to all of us. So it blows my mind that people are just like, "Yeah, I want to be a part of the show too." And it's like, no.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's not necessarily their fault if they... because that's what they think it is.
Conditioned to do it, yeah.
Yeah, so I've yet to really deal with that, but I'm not looking forward to it.
I'll heckle you the next time I see you.
Sounds good.
We'll get into it. Plug everything one more time. Let everybody know where they can find you.
Teddy Fischer _ haha, if you want to join the most underwhelming Instagram account.
You're up to 3 posts, baby.
Yeah, 3, maybe a 4th.
Get it
today, maybe. Who knows? Maybe I'll post a story of us. That'd be fun. No, you haven't earned it. And then I do a bi-weekly improv show at the Pit on Thursdays, starting October 5th.
Time?
Different time every week.
Okay.
I'll post about it on Instagram.
Boom, baby.
Let people know. Yeah.
Thanks for coming on,
This
dude.
has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
See, it wasn't as bad as you thought it was going to be.
I thought it was going to be terrible.
Well, you were nervous.
I wasn't nervous.
Well, you were nervous about the subject matter, less so about the...
Right.
You were like, I'm going to have to tell the stories about...
I can't run for office now.
Burying those people in my backyard.
They've known I've had Franzia. Well, that story we can tell off mic. But,
okay.
Yeah.
At Brennan T. Comedy on all social media, BrennanTComedy.com. Check out the one-man show, Ex Drinking Buddy, on Patreon. And I'll be in Philly, October 6th and 7th at Jester Castle. And I'll be at Broadway Comedy Club October 14th. Talk to y'all next week.
Bye.